Anyways, please welcome to the stream, ladies and gentlemen, the CEO of Election Predictions on YouTube. Please welcome 40,000 subscribers. He really knows stuff. Welcome Red Eagle Politics to the stream. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, thanks. So we obviously just did a segment about Kamala Harris. I guess we'll ask you that first, and then I'll ask you about like what your general predictions for the elections are. But what do you see in this? What do you see in this vice presidential pick? What effect does it have on the electorate in your mind?
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head there when you said she doesn't exactly appeal to the far left. She doesn't exactly appeal to the moderates either. She seems to just have a very small fan base. It's loud and annoying at times, but it doesn't exactly have the appeal. And the media is doing everyone a disservice by hyping her up as some sort of moderate or whatever. But you look at her voting record, and it's actually the most liberal voting record in the Senate. It's even more liberal than Bernie Sanders, who is one of the most notorious left-leaning individuals within the Senate. So already you can see they're trying to cover it up, and I don't think it's going to play out very well. And hopefully Donald Trump's campaign will be able to effectively attack her in ads or whatever in order to bring down Biden's campaign.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think the people that do like Kamala Harris are, this is a stereotype I would throw out, are the suburban moms that watch The View and used to watch Oprah back in the day and they're hardcore liberals that never needed an inspiration to turn out for Biden. Like, they hate Trump. They'll vote for any Democrat. They'll vote blue no matter who, regardless. So yeah, I agree with you there. But so generally speaking, what are you looking at for the November election? Like what do you see happening? Estimate of like how it looks right now, what Trump needs to do to win, what Biden would have to do to win. Because I gave my predictions, but mine are mainly just based on, this is what I think is going to happen. But give me what your take, because you are the CEO of this stuff. So what do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that Trump is having a good strategy right now. He's solidifying his support in places like Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, a lot of campaign trips, a lot of ad spending, things like that. The home stretch, I think he's going to spend in places like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, maybe New Hampshire, just so he can get that Rust Belt base on board that carried him to victory back in 2016.
So what do you, as of right now, like, and let's just assume that the things you would expect to happen before election day happen. Who do you see winning the election right now, and what do the numbers look like?
Well, in terms of right now, it's obviously difficult to forecast what would happen today. The polls right now have Biden up in many swing states, but again, there's a lot of time between now and the election. We're going to have the conventions. We're going to also have debates. Obviously, if there's going to be in-person debates, especially, I would expect Trump to win those. I would also expect Mike Pence to perform fairly well against Kamala Harris. I think he can take care of business there. So I think that if Trump does well in the debates, I think it's going to be a big determining factor. I think the lead will go from something like Biden +7 in the popular vote to Biden +3. And at that point, Trump very well could win the Electoral College. Personally, I don't see him winning the popular vote. But again, the election is not necessarily decided by the popular vote, so it really won't matter that much.
How do you, a lot of people, we see these polls and a lot of times people just disregard it, like, oh, well, the polls were wrong in 2016, they're going to be wrong again. So people sort of disregard it. But do you think that because I know you talk about this sometimes, do you think and for an ordinary person to understand without like a bunch of, political science expertise, like, is there a way for people to interpret polls, you would say, like, correctly? Because you say a lot of times like there's oversampling of Democrats or undersampling of Republicans or whatever. How do you think like regular people should be like interpreting these polls?
Well, I think that they need to look at them with a grain of salt. I think that the most accurate polls are the ones that are representing likely voters at this point instead of registered voters. I think those typically get the grasp of the public. And also, you see some of these polls that come out of YouGov and they oversample. Obviously, look at the crosstabs. If they're oversampling Democrats by like 15%, or if they have some like weirdly abysmal like crosstab that you wouldn't expect, for example, seniors going to Biden by 20 points, even though Trump won them convincingly back in 2016, I would just tell people to disregard some of those polls, toss them out. I think that overall, I think that polls at the statewide level are more accurate. But at the same time, polls in the Rust Belt, like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, typically underestimate Trump. I think back in 2016, they underestimated him by an average in like 5 points per state. So definitely we got to take the polls with a grain of salt, but you also got to look at the crosstabs and things like that. And closer, when we get closer to the election, I think the polls will be a little bit more accurate, especially as they add the likely voter screens and things like that.
What do you see? I think a lot of our biggest fear is not necessarily that like Trump doesn't flip the sort of states that he sort of had a miracle with in 2016, as much as what do you see in states that are historically red but you kind of see turning blue, like Arizona, Georgia, a little bit even Texas? What do you see happening in those states basically this November?
Well, I think Arizona is the one Trump's going to have to worry about the most. I think when it comes down to Georgia, if we look at a lot of the polls, Trump's actually up in the polls in Georgia. And same thing with Texas. Although the fact is, I think Trump will win Texas by more than the polls are showing right now, because there's a lot of undecideds in some of the polls that look very, good for Biden. There's typically like 15 to 20% undecided. So you have to take that into consideration as well. Personally, I think Trump's going to win Georgia by 3 to 4. I think he'll win Texas by around 6. I think Arizona's going to go down the wire, but the primary turnout data look fairly good for Republicans. So it's one of those states we're going to have to, wait and see. It's going to come down to turnout, and hopefully Republicans can get out to vote this time around.
So I want to shoot this theory at you, because I this has just been my little intuition, is that I think, because people say, oh, it's going to be before coronavirus. We talked about Trump flipping Minnesota, but now that simply coronavirus has happened, we think, oh, it's going to be a closer election, so we don't see that happening. But I'm going to throw this out there, and I've said this before, which is that I think the fact that just the nonsense that happened in Minneapolis, I mean, they burnt that damn city to the ground. They're abolishing the police there. I would think that for a state that's, you see, kind of trending red, craziness like that is really just what pushes it across the finish line and really flips the state. What do you think of that?
Well, I think I think that theory would be correct. I think if you look at the last couple of polls in Minnesota, they have Trump down by just an average of 4 points. There's many undecideds. Even Jason Lewis, the Republican there running for Senate, was 3 points down to Tina Smith as well. I think there's something going on in Minnesota. And we saw it last time around. A lot of the early polling had Trump down double digits to Hillary Clinton. In fact, the final aggregate had it by 9, and it ended up being one of the closest states. So I think that he would be dumb to discount it. I think that the Trump campaign very well should be pushing, the message in Minnesota about law and order. This is what the Democrats are going to do. Biden is going to go out there. He's going to listen to the radical left. He's going to listen to people like Kamala Harris. And he is going to push for the, defunding of police departments, as he said. Potentially what the left is going to do, lead us down this path where they're going to want to get rid of police departments as a whole. You see with a lot of what people are saying nowadays, it's like total nonsense. They're saying all cops are bad now. Eventually, they're going to want to all try to get rid of cops and abolish the police departments and have full out anarcho tyranny. And Trump said it perfectly. There's going to be a whole lot more Portlands. There's going to be a whole lot more of Chaz if Joe Biden is elected in 2020.
It's an interesting state because you don't see the same enthusiasm you do in a lot of the states that Trump won in 2016. Like, you don't see the big parades and the boat parades and all the flags out in everyone's yard and stuff like that. But I think there really is something going on there.
Well, yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that they've seen a lot more Trump flags and Trump signs in Minnesota that they've seen since 2016. Obviously, we can't go just off of yard sign analysis, but it does show that the Trump enthusiasm level, and it shows in every poll, even the polls that have Trump down by like 16, 17, some ridiculous number, that Trump supporters are far more enthused to vote for Trump than Biden supporters are enthused to vote for Biden. So you kind of see where the enthusiasm is. And if you factor that into the polling, that would give Trump a bump of several points alone. So I think that if Trump can keep his base enthused and get high turnout record numbers for the Republican Party, he's going to be able to win this election without any problems for sure.
Do you think this election will be decided by the normal factors? Because the way I see it, if we were to look at history, I would say if it's just like a normal time in history, I would say history says that Trump loses this election simply because the economy got screwed. You have this pandemic that's seen widely as a government failure. You have social unrest in the country. I would say, like, on a general year, it would, whatever is the incumbent, it seems like he would get voted out of office. But the thing is, in a lot of ways, sometimes people we get sort of caught up in the hype of what's going on right now. But I do think genuinely, in a lot of ways, this is a different year because Biden, we've never had a Democrat candidate this freaking crazy and actually disliked by a lot of people. So do you think that, like, the normal factors of history, like for example, Alan, what do you say, Lichtman or Leichman's model? Lichtman's model, where it's basically just, however the country's going, and if it's in a positive direction, incumbent wins. negative direction, incumbent loses. Do you see that being sort of the deciding factor here? Or do you think this is like a really genuinely a different election and the hype is real?
Yeah, no, I mean, history is important to look at, and there's many historical factors that would benefit Trump as well. I say Lichtman's model is an interesting model. It hasn't always been historically accurate. Looking back to, it got into the 1932 election wrong, actually, if you applied it to 1932, which is where you had the worst economy ever. He still had Hoover winning. But the bottom line here is that a lot of polls, even though, polls that are showing Trump down by 10 points, have people saying that when it comes to the economy, they still put their faith in Trump. I think that a lot of the factors, also work in Trump's direction. Obviously, we know he is the incumbent president. That's a big one. Also, Joe Biden is kind of a dead man walking, and I think a lot of people know it. And a lot of people that don't know it are soft Biden supporters because, you look at the crosstabs, you see Biden supporters far softer than Trump's. A lot of those voters could go to Trump. And I think the debates are going to come down to it. History is important to look at. But at the same time, this is Trump is Trump. He's broken all sorts of historical, records or whatever. So we know, obviously, that this election is going to come down the wire. But Trump, if he, puts his message out there, if he does well in the debates, he very well could end up winning this election. And I think he will.
Are there factors you think need to happen in the country basically to ensure his re-election, or do you think if he just gets the message right, like he got it? You know what I mean?
Well, I think the civil unrest factor could work into his benefit if you look at what the policies of Joe Biden and what Kamala Harris have been pushing for. I think that you could easily make an argument that Donald Trump would be the preferred candidate for a lot of people that are seeking a return to law and order in our cities. You look at what happened in Seattle. You look at what's going on in Portland, Chicago. It's a massive disaster. Trump is the one that's actually wanting to put a law and order message out there. Biden's the one that's going to sit back and do absolutely nothing. And I think that a lot of people understand that Biden is kind of a dead man at the wheel. He doesn't know where he is. And the people that are controlling him, like Kamala Harris, very, very far left individuals that will have a big stake of what goes on in his administration. So I think that that's the message Trump needs to get out there. And if he can get that out there clearly, I think that he will do very well in this election.
I guess this is the last thing we'll talk about here. What does it look like? Because regardless of who wins, I think Republicans keeping the Senate is important in its own way, regardless. But what is it looking like in the Senate right now? Because it's almost basically as important as the presidency, because at least if Biden wins, we can hold the Senate. And then if Trump wins, at least the Senate can keep confirming conservative judges.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think it's important the Republicans get, 52 seats in the Senate, because you obviously know there's a couple people like Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, that very well could vote with Biden. But I think that when it comes down to the Senate as a whole, I think Republicans obviously are going to flip Alabama by a very, very wide margin. I think Colorado, that Colorado, Arizona are going to flip into the Democrat column. Michigan could flip Republican if Trump does a very good job here. John James is a great candidate. But it's going to come down to North Carolina, Maine. I think Republicans have a good stronghold on Montana, Kansas. Those are not going to flip this cycle. But it's going to come down to Maine and North Carolina. If Democrats win in North Carolina, which I think they would right now in the Senate, but Republicans hold in Maine, they would be able to keep the Senate by a 51-49 margin. But I can't see the Dems getting above 50. But if they get 50 and the White House, then that's trouble, because Kamala Harris will be the deciding vote in the Senate on many issues, and disaster will ensue. So obviously it's very important that Republicans need to vote Republican down ballot if they want the Trump agenda being passed in Congress.
Yeah, definitely. Anyways, thank you for coming on. For those of you guys that are watching my stream tonight, Red Eagle Politics, YouTube name right now. There's going to be a lot going on between now and election day. Maybe we'll have you back, but definitely make sure you make sure you subscribe to him and keep following him for election updates. He's the CEO of that stuff. I don't know why you guys always ask me, because I'm a commentator. I don't look at that stuff. But anyways, thanks for coming on tonight.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, so there you have it, guys. All right, that's what the election is. I felt the obligation to bring on someone who actually knows anything after I gave my atrocious election predictions for you guys the other week. But anyways, Hey, hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, this is a clip from my weekly show. We do a weekly show called America Rising, The Vince Dow Show, live here on YouTube every Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you enjoyed it and you want to see more, be sure to tune in to the weekly show every Friday. We will obviously be having one tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, live reaction to the Republican National Convention and the Kenosha riots. So make sure you're there. See you guys.